Elon Musk, another intellectual like me, SpaceX, and T-Mobile. And recently, Elon Musk, along with the SpaceX team, decided to team up with T-Mobile, and they're going to be using Starlink satellites to basically provide mobile communication to users that are in basic dead zones. And we all know about the dead zones. They're all over the place in the world, and they all show these like beautiful commercials and these beautiful charts on TV commercials, like, oh, look at us, we have all this coverage, and there's like all blue dots and red dots everywhere, but there's always dead zones around, and they're not being intellectually honest with how bad their coverage is. So by teaming up with T-Mobile, they're basically going to have these satellites. They're going to put these satellites into the atmosphere and into space, and they're going to be providing this mobile phone service. And they're going to be offering this service at no charge, and it's going to be a part of their most popular plans. And some of the plans they will charge for, but those are for the cheaper plans. But if you have a standard package plan and you're part of the plans where most people have, you're going to have no charge, and it's going to work with any cell phone that you have right now. It will work with. You will not have to buy a new phone for this internet to work. And basically this is going to launch in 2023. They think this is going to launch, and basically they're going to put these satellites into Earth's orbit. And you know what's good about this is that it's going to provide coverage in international waters. So when you go on like cruise ships and such, and you have these roaming charges, and you're not able to go on the internet, well, these sat phones internet coverage will be able to provide this high-speed internet for both remote locations across the globe as well as in international waters. So this is a game changer, and it's going to be available across the United States, in Alaska, Puerto Rico, and Hawaii, and they even have plans to expand it internationally. And SpaceX is going to be teaming up with other phone companies in the future, they said in their press conference. And basically, along with T-Mobile's help, they're going to be expanding this coverage, and they're going to be providing reciprocity to other mobile companies, so that basically they could benefit off of their plan. So say if you're in Guatemala or something like that, you might have a Guatemalan phone company be able to benefit their users when they come to the United States. Will be able to use T-Mobile's coverage for their sat phones, as well as when U.S. users go to Guatemala, they'll be able to use the Guatemalan phone company's coverage that teams up with SpaceX. So this is truly revolutionary, what's going on. And if SpaceX is able to get a lot of phone companies to sign up across the globe, this is going to be a game changer. And if you look at countries where they don't have internet and where they restrict internet, this could also be a game changer, since SpaceX could provide coverage to those places through their satellites without the permission of these governmental entities.
It's interesting because when you think about it, right? Like SpaceX already has a ton of these fucking satellites they shot into orbit. But now I heard that they have a contract with the ISS. They have approval to shoot, I believe it's 40,000 of these satellites. So when you think about it, if they're actually using these satellites for, cellular data in the form of delivering text messages and calls and things of that nature, right? Or even just pairing it to some type of like 4 or 5G system as well through satellites. We could really get to a point where there basically are no dead zones in the United States. It's the reality, right? Because if I would think that SpaceX at full capacity with 40,000 of these Starlink satellites in orbit, there really shouldn't be any dead zones, or if there are dead zones, they're going to be few and far between. So that's number one. And number two, I do like that concept of reciprocity, where you could go to any other country and you'll still be able to, you'll just use their service, and then, or vice versa. So that's really interesting. And I think that's a good thought process that they're kind of going with. And I think these other companies are in big trouble because this is an innovation that can clearly and very evidently push us into a realm where everything's going to be instantaneous. There's going to be no reason why you won't be able to connect to the internet. And Starlink, it just seems like a brilliant idea, and it'll be very interesting to see how well this continues. The only thing that I have to say, which I guess is somewhat a complaint, is that 2023 deadline, or really target date that they came up with. Is that an Elon deadline or is that a normal person deadline? Because we know that Elon Musk likes to say that things are coming out a little bit earlier than they do. And I think that he does that, but I don't think he does that to be disingenuous. I think he does that because he assumes that everyone works at the same pace as him and everyone's as smart as him. So,
Yeah, I mean, I supposedly they did a press conference with the CEO of T-Mobile, Cybert, and he agreed that that was going to be the deadline as well. So I think they should be able to meet that deadline. And the true benefit to this service is that, say there's a natural disaster like a hurricane, a tornado, say there's a war where all the cell towers get knocked down. Well, cell phone service would still work in those scenarios, and that's when you want your cell phone the most in natural disasters. So it doesn't make sense that we still use cell towers today and aren't using sat phones. I mean, if you're in the wilderness, you use a sat phone. Any kind of survivor guide uses a sat phone. Sat phones should have been commonplace in the world today, and we shouldn't be using these cell towers. I think they're basically integrated and they shouldn't be used anymore. But the problem with these, as the problem with some of these satellite phones is the bandwidth. Basically, one satellite can only support, I think he said in the meeting, 1 megabit of data, and then he broke it down like mathematically, and basically he said that it would basically support 2 to 3 thousand users could use it simultaneously for each satellite that gets launched. So this could be awfully expensive to launch enough satellites to support a large magnitude of people in the United States. You would have to launch a shit ton of satellites.
well, I actually just did the math. So let's say 3,000 people can be powered on one satellite. Per what I was saying before, they have an agreement with the ISS to send out 40,000 satellites. I'm sure it'll be more than the 40,000, but at least that initial batch of satellites is 40,000. So if you do 3,000 people on 40,000 satellites, you're looking at 120 million people. The US population, I believe, is 330 million people. So you'd actually cover like a third of the United States, which I guess is not that bad. Like that's actually pretty good. And that's
But
just in that initial batch of 40,000 satellites launched.
well, it wouldn't really cover 120 million people. That was basically using basic bandwidth material. So you just like making a phone call. Now, if people were like roaming the internet, they would be using more bandwidth, so it would be less people than the 3,000. So it depends on what the 3,000 people are doing at the same time. That was just counting if the people were just making a phone call. So I'm not sure how many people it would actually support if like the people were like roaming internet and doing different things like that. But yeah, 120 million people.
Even half is pretty decent too, though. 60 million people. Like, let's assume that number is half accurate. That 120 million I came up with. Let's say it actually would support 60 million people or 50 million people. That's still a pretty big number for, generally speaking, like very basic infrastructure. Because, like I said, that they're allowed to send out the 40,000 per, like the ISS.
I mean, right, considering that it's only supposed to be used as a backup and for people that are in dead zones, and that people still have cell towers and people are still using other means to get their bandwidth. Yeah, I mean that should be plenty enough to support the dead zones in the United States and in international waters.